October 2022. Rain falls relentlessly on Portsmouth, New Hampshire, turning the historic streets into wet mirrors reflecting the gray sky. On Hancock Street, number 237, an elegant three-story Victorian house is surrounded by yellow police tape. Forensic technicians in white jumpsuits enter and exit. Through the back door, carrying equipment and samples sealed in plastic bags. Detective Marcus Samuels, 58, cold case specialist with the Portsmouth Police Department, stands motionless under a black umbrella, observing the scene with eyes that have seen too much. 27 years on the force and 14 dedicated exclusively to unsolved cases have transformed him into an almost legendary figure in the department. Known for his methodical patience and photographic memory for details, Samuels carries on his face the marks of age and the weight of secrets that never found resolution. Detective Samuels. The voice belongs to Elena Rodriguez, 34, a forensic analyst recently transferred from Boston. The team found something you need to see. The two descend the narrow stairs leading to the basement. The smell of damp earth and old wood fills the air. Under the intense light of the spotlights installed by the forensic team, a section of the wooden floor has been removed, revealing the dark soil below. This is where the contractor found the first item yesterday afternoon, explains Rodriguez, pointing to a makeshift table where two objects are displayed on a white cloth. He was installing a drainage system when the metal detector beeped. Samuels approaches slowly, like someone recognizing old acquaintances. A small child's shoe, partially decomposed, still preserved by the yellowed plastic that wrapped it. Beside it, a silver chain with an oval medallion. Even under decades of dirt, the inscription is clearly visible. Laura, 1981. 41 years, Samuels murmurs, eyes fixed on the objects. 41 years under this floor. The discovery isn't accidental. Richard Bennett, 42, a history professor at the University of New Hampshire, had purchased the property 3 years earlier. During recent torrential rains, the basement began flooding regularly, forcing him to hire a company to install a proper drainage system. I never imagined. I just wanted to fix the moisture problem, Bennett repeats for the third time, sitting in the kitchen while another detective records his statement. My God, I slept above this for 3 years. While the team continues the meticulous excavation work, Samuels returns to his car. From the glove compartment, he retrieves a yellowed folder labeled Miller Laura, missing 08-15-1981. The pages are worn from handling. Like many cold case detectives, Samuels has his personal ghosts, cases that haunt him even after decades. The disappearance of 7-year-old Laura Miller is one of them. You have a personal connection to this case, observes Rodriguez, who followed him to the car. It's not a question. It was my first year on the force, Samuels replies, carefully leafing through the file with reverence. I was 17 when she disappeared. The whole town searched for weeks. I still remember the posters on telephone poles. The black and white photographs show a smiling girl with curly blonde hair and light eyes. In one, Laura smiles, holding an ice cream cone, displaying a gap where 2 front teeth are missing. In another, she wears the medallion, the same one now being cataloged as evidence in the basement. We never found a body, Samuels continues. Her mother, Nancy Miller, never left town. Refused to move. Said Laura would find her way home someday and she needed to be there when it happened. The radio on Rodriguez's belt crackles. Detective, we found something else. Back in the basement, the head of the forensic team, Dr. Kaplan, points to a newly excavated area, about a meter to the right of where the shoe was found. Bone fragments consistent with a child between 6 and 8 years old. And this. A faded friendship bracelet made of colored threads rests in a metal tray. The colors, once vibrant, are now pale but still distinguishable, blue, red, and yellow intertwined. Good God, Samuels murmurs. He quickly flips through the file until he finds a statement. Her best friend, Jennifer Collins, said they made identical bracelets during the last week of class before summer vacation. Laura never took hers off. Dr. Kaplan approaches with another item on a tray. We found this too. Appears to be part of a diary. 3 heavily deteriorated paper pages protected in a sealed plastic bag. The blue ink, almost illegible, reveals a childish handwriting. The date at the top of the first page, August 12, 1981, 3 days before the disappearance. While Rodriguez coordinates the continuation of the excavation, Samuels climbs the stairs to breathe fresh air. On the front lawn, a small crowd of onlookers has already formed, kept at a distance by police tape and 2 uniformed officers. Among the spectators, an elderly woman in a wheelchair observes the scene with unsettling intensity. Her white hair frames a face marked by both time and pain. When her gaze meets Samuel's, he immediately recognizes her, Nancy Miller, 75, Laura's mother. Samuels crosses the police tape and approaches her. "Mrs. Miller." "So it's true," she says, her voice surprisingly firm. "You found her." "We're still investigating, but—" Samuels hesitates, then decides on the honesty this woman deserves after 4 decades of waiting. "Yes, we believe we found Laura." Nancy Miller doesn't cry. Perhaps all tears were shed decades ago. This house, it belonged to the Gaines. Back then, Frederick and Margaret. "Yes, ma'am. We're trying to locate them now." "Margaret died in 2015, Nancy says, her eyes never leaving the house. "Cancer. Frederick moved to Florida right after. Never even came back for her funeral." Samuels makes a mental note. "How did you know we were here?" A faint smile crosses Nancy's lips. "Small town, detective. Some things never change." She pauses, studying his face. "You were just a rookie when it happened. I remember you. You brought coffee to the search volunteers." Before Samuels can respond, Rodriguez approaches urgently. "Detective, we found something significant." Her voice drops to a whisper. "There appear to be remains of multiple children." Samuels feels the world tilt slightly. He looks back at Nancy Miller, whose expression hasn't changed, as if she somehow already knew. "I need to get back in there," he tells her. Gently. "I'll be here," she replies. "I've waited 41 years. I can wait a little longer." As Samuels turns to follow Rodriguez back to the house, his phone buzzes with a text message. The department has located Frederick Gaines, now 83, living in a retirement community in Tampa. The preliminary background check has revealed something disturbing. Before moving to Portsmouth in 1978, Gaines lived in 3 other New England towns. Each location coincided with an unsolved disappearance of a child. Standing at the threshold between past and present, Samuels feels the familiar tightening in his chest that comes with every cold case breakthrough, a mixture of dread and determination. The rain continues to fall, washing away the surface of things. But some secrets remain buried deep, waiting patiently to be unearthed. "This isn't just about Laura Miller anymore, is it?" Rodriguez asks quietly. "No," Samuels replies, watching as more equipment is carried into the basement. "I think this is just the beginning." August 15th, 1981. The summer heat presses down on Portsmouth like a weighted blanket. The harbor is crowded with tourists and locals seeking relief near the water. On Maple Street, Laura Miller emerges from Henderson's ice cream parlor at precisely 4:35 p.m., clutching a double scoop of strawberry in one hand and her small change purse in the other. The bell above the door chimes as she steps onto the sidewalk. "See you tomorrow, Laura," calls Mrs. Henderson from behind the counter. The shop owner has known the Miller family for years and always gives Laura an extra-large scoop. "Thanks for the ice cream," Laura replies, her voice bright and clear in the summer air. This exchange, innocuous and forgettable on any other day, becomes seared into Mrs. Henderson's memory as the last time anyone would hear Laura Miller's voice in public. 4 witnesses would later confirm seeing the blonde 7-year-old walking down Maple Street, ice cream cone in hand, her pink shorts and white t-shirt with a rainbow design making her easy to identify. Margaret Sullivan, then 62, was watering flowers on her front porch when Laura walked past. "She waved at me with her free hand," Sullivan told police. She was always such a polite child. I noticed her medallion catching the sunlight as she passed. The medallion, a silver oval on a chain, had been a birthday present from her father Thomas just 2 months prior. Inside was a tiny photograph of their family. Laura's route home from Henderson's was a straightforward 5-block walk that she had done countless times before. Her mother Nancy had established clear rules: no detours, no talking to strangers, home before dinner. By all accounts, Laura was a responsible child who followed these rules religiously. At 6:15 p.m., Nancy Miller called the police to report her daughter missing. The responding officers initially treated it as a standard missing child case, explains retired Officer James Connolly, 73, reviewing his original notes from that day. "We assumed she'd lost track of time playing somewhere. Kids did that back then. But by nightfall, with no sign of Laura and dozens of neighbors already joining the search, the atmosphere in Portsmouth had transformed. Well, following morning, state police were called in. By the end of the week, Laura's face was on every telephone pole and storefront window in coastal New Hampshire. The most compelling witness statement came from Charlie Burton, then 11 years old, says Detective Samuels reviewing the case file in the Portsmouth Police Conference Room in October 2022. He reported seeing Laura talking to someone in a blue sedan near the corner of Maple and Chestnut around 4:45 p.m. He couldn't describe the driver, only noting it was an adult with dark hair. Rodriguez spreads out enhanced copies of the original. Police reports on the table. The investigation initially focused on registered sex offenders in the area, but none could be connected to the case. Then attention turned to the Millers themselves, Samuels continues, his face grim. Standard procedure in child disappearances, but the media circus made it particularly brutal for the family. Thomas Miller, a shipyard worker at the naval base, was interrogated multiple times. His initial alibi, that he was working overtime that Saturday, was temporarily undermined when a co-worker misremembered the schedule. Though he was quickly cleared, the damage to his reputation lingered in the small community. "People started avoiding us at the grocery store," Nancy Miller recalls, sitting in her modest living room surrounded by photographs of Laura and her 2 older siblings. "Thomas couldn't handle the whispers, the suspicions. Our marriage couldn't survive it." The original investigation also questioned the residents of 237 Hancock Street, the Victorian house where Laura's remains would be discovered 41 years later. In 1981, it belonged to Frederick and Margaret Gaines, he a respected professor at the local university, she a nurse at Portsmouth General Hospital. The Gaines were interviewed twice, Rodriguez notes, holding up the original statement forms. Frederick claimed he was grading papers at home all afternoon. Margaret stated she was at work until 7 p.m., which the hospital confirmed. "What's interesting," Samuels Wisier interjects, "is what's not in these reports." He pulls out a notepad with his own writings. "I've spent the last 3 days interviewing former neighbors of the Gaines. 3 of them mentioned Margaret's brother, William Tanner, was a frequent visitor that summer. Yet there's no record he was ever questioned." Rodriguez leans forward. "How was that missed?" According to Chester Phillips, who lived next door, Tanner wasn't there the week of the disappearance. He had supposedly returned to California a few days earlier. With no connection to the timeline, investigators never followed up. The modern investigation team has now assembled a digital war room at the Portsmouth Police Department. Crime scene photos from 1981 hang beside contemporary images from the basement excavation. DNA results from the remains are still pending, but preliminary forensic archaeology confirms they belong to at least 3 different children, based on bone size and development. We're cross-referencing every missing child case in New England between 1975 and 1985, explains Sergeant Kevin Walsh, heading the data analysis team. So far, we've identified 7 cases with similar patterns. Children between 6 and 12 disappearing within a 10-mile radius of where Frederick Gaines was living or working at the time. As the team works to establish connections, Samuels receives a call from the forensic lab. The partial diary found in the basement has yielded results. After careful restoration and analysis, portions of the text are legible. August 12, 1981. Dear Diary, today, I saw the man with the blue car again. He waved at me from across the street when I was walking home from Jennifer's house. Mom says not to talk to strangers, but he's not really a stranger because he's Mr. Gaines's brother. He said he has a puppy at their house and I can come see it sometime. Samuels places the phone on speaker so Rodriguez can hear the lab technician reading the recovered text. Their eyes meet across the conference room table. The pieces are starting to align. We need to find William Tanner, Rodriguez says quietly. And we need to speak with Frederick Gaines, adds Samuels, already reaching for his coat. Before he realizes we're on to him. In Tampa, Florida, an 83-year-old man sits on the veranda of his retirement community apartment, watching a local news broadcast on his tablet. The headline scrolls across the bottom of the screen. Child remains discovered in historic Portsmouth home. Cold case reopened after 41 years. Frederick Gaines switches off the tablet with a trembling hand and picks up his phone. He dials a number he hasn't called in years, but still knows by heart. When it connects, he speaks only 5 words. William, they found the basement. In Portsmouth, the rain has finally stopped. The excavation at 237 Hancock Street continues under bright portable lights that illuminate the neighborhood well into the night. Nancy Miller has refused to leave, maintaining her vigil across the street. A local restaurant has brought her coffee and a blanket. I promised Laura I'd be here when she came home, she tells a young officer who checks on her. I keep my promises. Portsmouth, New Hampshire, 1981, a maritime community where salt permeated the air, and locals measured distance by landmarks rather than miles. Before Laura Miller's disappearance, it was a place where children played freely until streetlights flickered on, where unlocked doors were common, and stranger danger was something that happened in bigger cities, not in this close-knit coastal town with its colonial architecture and naval history. We were naive, admits Elaine Cooper, 78, who served as Portsmouth's mayor from 1979 to 1984. When Laura disappeared, it shattered our collective sense of security. It was as if someone had pulled back a curtain and shown us that our idyllic community wasn't immune to the evils of the world. The Millers embodied the Portsmouth middle class of the early 1980s. Thomas Miller, 35 at the time, was a respected mechanical engineer at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, where aircraft carriers and submarines were maintained. Nancy, 34, taught 3rd grade at Portsmouth Elementary. They had 3 children, David, 12, Laura, 7, and Michael, 4. Their 2-story home on Pine Street, with its modest yard and American flag, represented stability and normalcy. We were happy, Nancy Miller says softly, touching a family photograph taken at Hampton Beach just 1 month before the tragedy. Thomas was talking about buying a small sailboat. Laura was excited about starting 2nd grade. David had just made the junior baseball team. Across town, the Gaines family presented an equally respectable facade. Frederick Gaines, 42, held a tenured position in the history department at Portsmouth University, specializing in colonial American studies. His lectures regularly drew students from other departments. Margaret Gaines, 40, worked as a pediatric nurse at Portsmouth General, known for her gentle manner with frightened children. They had no children of their own, a subject neighbors understood was sensitive. Margaret desperately wanted children, recalls Judith Langley, who lived across the street. She suffered 2 miscarriages that I know of. Frederick seemed less interested in parenthood. He was always absorbed in his academic work. What few people in Portsmouth knew was the frequent presence of Margaret's brother, William Tanner, in their lives. 5 years younger than Margaret, Tanner lived primarily in California but made extended visits to Portsmouth. He was charming but somehow unsettling, says Robert E. Daniels, who owned the hardware store where Tanner occasionally purchased supplies. He'd talk your ear off about his travels, his business ventures. Always seemed to have cash but never a clear job. Margaret adored him, though. She'd light up when he came to town. The relationships between these two families, the Millers and the Gaines, were peripheral at best before the tragedy. Nancy had once attended a faculty dinner with Thomas where Frederick Gaines was present. Margaret had occasionally seen Laura during routine checkups at the pediatric clinic, but these tenuous connections would become scrutinized following August 15, 1981. The investigation initially focused on establishing Laura's movements that fateful Saturday. The weather had been unusually hot, with temperatures reaching 92 degrees. Laura had asked permission to walk to Henderson's ice cream parlor, a treat her mother allowed twice a week during summer vacation. "I remember hesitating that day," Nancy Miller says, her voice still carrying the weight of decades of second-guessing. "It was so hot, and I almost offered to drive her, but Laura insisted she wanted to walk. She liked her independence." The police response to Laura's disappearance was initially routine, becoming increasingly urgent as hours passed. By Sunday morning, volunteer search parties had formed. By Monday, state police and FBI agents had arrived. The media descended shortly thereafter. It dominated every conversation, every interaction, remembers Pastor Robert Hamilton of First Presbyterian Church, who organized prayer vigils. "For months, you couldn't go anywhere in Portsmouth without seeing Laura's face on posters, in shop windows, on car bumpers. People wore blue ribbons, her favorite color. The community's initial unity fractured as weeks passed without resolution. Rumors circulated. Some whispered that Thomas Miller had been acting strangely at work. Others wondered if the drifter seen near the harbor might be responsible. A local psychic claimed Laura was near water, a virtually meaningless observation in a coastal town. The Millers' marriage became a casualty of the tragedy and subsequent scrutiny. Thomas couldn't handle the suspicion, explains David Miller, now 53, speaking from his home in Colorado. Even after he was officially cleared, people looked at him differently. He started drinking. Mom was consumed by her search for Laura. It became her entire existence. They were both drowning in different ways. The divorce came in 1983. Thomas relocated to Oregon, remarried years later, and died in 2010 from heart failure. Nancy remained in Portsmouth, establishing the Laura Miller Foundation. For missing children in 1985, she never remarried. Mom converted her grief into purpose, says Michael Miller, 45, the youngest sibling. But our family was never whole again. I grew up in the shadow of a sister I barely remember, with a mother whose pain was always visible beneath the surface. The Gaines family experienced their own transformation following the investigation. Though never officially suspects, the questioning left them ostracized. Frederick requested a sabbatical in 1982, and they temporarily relocated to Vermont. When they returned a year later, they kept to themselves. Margaret became withdrawn, recalls her former colleague, Nurse Susan Blackwell. She requested a transfer from pediatrics to geriatrics. Frederick threw himself into research, publishing 3 books in 5 years. They rarely entertained anymore. William Tanner's visits to Portsmouth became less frequent but didn't stop entirely. Property records show he purchased a cabin in neighboring Maine in 1985, occasionally staying there instead of with his sister and brother-in-law. "What strikes me now," says Detective Samuels in 2022, reviewing old witness statements, is how Tanner moved around. Before 1981, he was primarily in California but made frequent trips east. After Laura's disappearance, his pattern shifted. He spent more time in the Pacific Northwest and Southwest. Looking at the data now, his movements correlate with at least 11 unsolved child disappearances across 4 decades. The city of Portsmouth itself carried the scars of Laura's case long after the active investigation went cold. Parents became more protective. Children were no longer allowed to roam freely. The ice cream parlor where Laura was last seen eventually closed in 1987, the owner claiming she couldn't bear the memories. "We lost our innocence," explains historian Marion Fletcher, who documented the social changes in Portsmouth following the case. The town divided into before Laura and after Laura eras. "Safety measures we take for granted today, school check-in procedures, community watch programs. Many of these were implemented here as direct responses to her disappearance. Nancy Miller's dedication to finding answers never wavered. Each year on Laura's birthday, she held a public remembrance. Each August 15th, she retraced her daughter's last known steps. She maintained detailed files on the investigation, corresponding regularly with detectives even as the case grew colder. "I recognized her yesterday outside the excavation site," says Rodriguez, reviewing photographs of Nancy Miller across the decades. "Her physical appearance has changed, but that look of quiet determination is exactly the same as in these images from 1981. 41 years of waiting, never giving up." As forensic technicians in 2022 carefully sift through soil in the basement of 237 Hancock Street, the past and present of Portsmouth converge. The excavation has become a macabre spectacle, drawing onlookers too young to remember the original case. Local businesses offered discounts to the investigation team. The current mayor has promised full cooperation and resources. The modern Portsmouth, with its upscale restaurants, boutique shops, and tourism industry, seems far removed from the working-class naval town of 1981. But beneath the renovated facades and gentrified neighborhoods, the memory of Laura Miller had never truly faded. "This town has been holding its breath for 4 decades, says Samuels, watching as another evidence bag is carried from the Victorian house. "Now, finally, we might be able to exhale." In Santa Monica, California, a 76-year-old William Tanner sits in his oceanfront condominium watching the Portsmouth news coverage on his computer. His oncologist has given him 6 months to live. The oxygen tank beside his armchair hisses rhythmically. The phone call from Frederick earlier that day had been brief but devastating. Tanner opens his desk drawer and removes a small wooden box. Inside lies a collection of trinkets: a child's hair ribbon, a small plastic toy soldier, a ticket stub from a county fair in Idaho dated 1993. He runs his fingers over them, remembering. Then he picks up his phone and dials a number. "This is William Tanner," he says when the call connects. "I'd like to speak with Detective Marcus Samuels of the Portsmouth Police Department." "Yes, I'll hold." Back in Portsmouth, Nancy Miller finally allows a police officer to drive her home as darkness falls. For the first time in decades, she sleeps through the night without waking to check if Laura has somehow, miraculously, returned home. November 2022. The State Police Forensic Laboratory in Concord, New Hampshire, hums with activity even at 3:17 a.m. Under the harsh fluorescent lighting, Dr. Amelia Chen, head of the DNA analysis unit, carefully extracts degraded genetic material from a fragment of bone. Her team has been working in shifts around the clock since the discovery at 237 Hancock Street 3 weeks ago. "The challenges are significant," Dr. Chen explains, not looking up from her work. "We're dealing with remains that have been underground for over 4 decades. Environmental factors, moisture, bacterial action, root intrusion, all degrade DNA. But the technology we have now..." She pauses, allowing herself a small smile. "It would have seemed, like science fiction in 1981. The laboratory represents the convergence of history and cutting-edge science. What began as a simple drainage installation has evolved into one of New Hampshire's most complex forensic investigations. The excavation has yielded remains of 3 children, all buried beneath the basement floor of the Victorian house at different depths, suggesting different time periods. The shallowest burial is consistent with Laura Miller, explains Dr. Kaplan, the forensic anthropologist. The medallion and friendship bracelet were found with those remains, and preliminary skeletal analysis indicates a female child between 6 to 8 years of age. The other 2 sets of remains were buried deeper and appear to predate Laura's disappearance, possibly by several years. 60 miles away in Portsmouth, the investigation has transformed the police department. The conference room has become a war room, walls covered with timelines, photographs, and maps tracking the movements of 3 key individuals: Frederick Gaines, Margaret Gaines, and William Tanner. "We've digitized every document from the original investigation," explains Sergeant Walsh, leading the technical team. "Every statement, every report, every photograph has been scanned and entered into our database for cross-referencing and pattern recognition. This digital archaeology has already yielded critical insights missed in the pre-computer era." An intern reviewing scanned newspaper photographs discovered William Tanner's face in the background of a community search party for Laura, despite claims he had left town days before her disappearance. Detective Samuels stands before a digital map showing 7 red pins across New England. Each pin represents a child disappearance between 1975 and 1985, he tells the assembled team. "We've overlaid property records, employment history, and known locations of our 3 persons of interest during these periods. The pattern is unmistakable. Every red pin falls within a 20-mile radius of a place where either Frederick Gaines taught as a visiting professor or William Tanner is known to have stayed. This isn't coincidence," Rodriguez asserts, studying the map. "The statistical probability of this alignment occurring randomly is less than 0.02% according to our analyst. The investigation's technological arsenal extends beyond digital records. Ground-penetrating radar has been deployed at 2 other properties previously owned by Frederick Gaines in Vermont and Maine. Soil samples from the basement are being analyzed for chemical signatures that might indicate decomposition at specific time periods. Most promising is the genetic analysis. Modern forensic genealogy, the same technique that identified the Golden State Killer in 2018, offers hope for definitively identifying the remains and potentially linking them to the perpetrator. We've extracted mitochondrial DNA profiles from all 3 sets of remains," Dr. Chen reports, via video conference. "The profile from Set A is consistent with Nancy Miller's maternal lineage, supporting our theory that these are Laura's remains. For Sets B and C, we're running the profiles through genealogical databases to find potential family matches. This genetic detective work has already yielded a breakthrough. The DNA from the deeper burials shows markers consistent with children reported missing in 1978 and 1976. Jessica Hammond from Kittery, Maine, and Daniel Forrester from Newburyport, Massachusetts. Both disappearances occurred in towns where Frederick Gaines had academic connections. While forensic science builds the case, Rodriguez and Samuels focus on reconstructing the human elements. The diary fragments found with Laura's remains have been carefully restored using digital enhancement techniques. The entries paint a disturbing picture of grooming behavior. August 14, 1981. Dear Diary, Mr. Williams showed me his special collection today when I visited. He has amazing things from all over the world. He said I'm special and smart, not like other kids. He gave me candy that tasted funny. I got really sleepy after. This entry made the day. Before Laura disappeared, provides crucial insight into William Tanner's methodology. Historical phone records, painstakingly recovered from archived telephone company microfilm, reveal a pattern of calls between the Gaines residence and Tanner's California number in the hours immediately following Laura's disappearance. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source, Samuels tells the district attorney during a preliminary briefing. Margaret Gaines kept a personal diary from 1975 until her death in 2015. Her sister-in-law discovered it while clearing her belongings and turned it over to us after seeing the news about the excavation. The diary entries from August 1981 are chilling in their clinical detachment. August 15th. William made a terrible mistake today, the Miller girl. He swears it was an accident. She had a bad reaction to the sedative. Frederick is furious, but agrees we must protect William. He's family. We'll use the space beneath the basement floor as we did before. Frederick says the lime will accelerate decomposition. I'll take an extra shift at the hospital tomorrow to establish normalcy. Armed with this evidence, the investigation focuses on locating William Tanner. His last known address in Santa Monica proves to be a dead end. He sold the condominium 3 weeks earlier, immediately after the Portsmouth discovery made national news. The breakthrough comes through digital financial forensics. Tanner's Medicare records show ongoing treatment for late-stage lung cancer at a hospice facility in Tucson, Arizona, under the name William Gainsford, a crude amalgamation of his real surname and his brother-in-law's. "He's dying," Rodriguez observes, reviewing the medical records obtained via court order. Stage 4 lung cancer with metastasis to the liver and brain. Prognosis is less than 6 months. "Which makes this our one chance to get justice," Samuels responds, already booking flights to Arizona. As the technological investigation narrows the focus to William Tanner, Frederick Gaines remains a critical piece of the puzzle. Now 84 and suffering from early-stage dementia, he has been placed under surveillance at his Tampa retirement community. His internet searches since the discovery include statute of limitations accessory after the fact murder NH, and criminal liability dementia patients. The DNA evidence provides the final irrefutable connection. A water bottle discarded by Frederick Gaines and collected by Florida agents yields a partial DNA profile. When compared to trace evidence preserved from Laura's clothing, the results show a familial match, not to Frederick, but indicating a close biological relative had contact with Laura shortly before her death. William Tanner is Frederick Gaines's half-brother, Dr. Chen explains, highlighting the genetic markers on her screen. Same father, different mothers. This explains the biological connection we're seeing in the DNA evidence. This revelation transforms the investigation's understanding of the family dynamics. Records indicate Frederick and William shared a father who abandoned both families, creating a bond between the half-brothers that transcended conventional morality. Margaret's diary suggests she knew about the biological connection, Rodriguez notes. She refers to them as bound by blood and secrets multiple times. As Thanksgiving approaches, the case reaches its decisive phase. The DNA analysis definitively identifies all 3 sets of remains. The technical evidence forms an overwhelming case against William Tanner as the killer, and the Gaines couple as accessories after the fact. Armed with federal warrants, Samuels and Rodriguez prepare to fly to Arizona to confront the dying man whose actions devastated so many families. The technical groundwork has been laid. The evidence is irrefutable. But both detectives know that technology alone cannot provide the answers to the most haunting questions. Why? How could these respected community members harbor such darkness? And what can they possibly say to Nancy Miller, who has waited 41 years to learn the truth about her daughter's final moments? Technology gives us the what, when, and how, Samuels says, studying Laura's school photograph one last time before departing. But only Tanner can give us the why. As their plane takes off from Boston Logan International Airport, the laboratory in Concord completes its final analysis. The results are unequivocal. William Tanner's DNA is present on all 3 victims. The narrowing is complete. The path to justice, decades in the making, leads directly to a hospice room in the Arizona desert. Desert Palms Hospice sits on the outskirts of Tucson, Arizona, its adobe-style architecture blending with the muted browns and reds of the surrounding landscape. The November air is dry and surprisingly cool as Detectives Samuels and Rodriguez approach the facility, their rental car raising small clouds of dust in the parking lot. According to the administrator, he checked in 3 weeks ago under the name William Gainsford, Rodriguez says, reviewing her notes. Used fake documentation, but Medicare eventually flagged the inconsistencies. That's how we found him. Samuels nods, his expression grim. After 41 years pursuing Laura Miller's case, the prospect of finally confronting her killer leaves him with a strange hollowness. Has he had any visitors? None recorded, Rodriguez replies. But there was a wire transfer to his account from an offshore bank in the Cayman Islands 3 days after the Portsmouth discovery hit the news. $500,000. Frederick making sure his brother stays comfortable and quiet. The hospice director, Dr. Elaine Martinez, meets them at the entrance. Her professional demeanor doesn't quite mask her discomfort at having a suspected serial killer under her care. Mr. Gainsford, or Tanner as you say, is in Our Eastern Wing. He's on high-dose morphine for pain management, but he has periods of complete lucidity, usually in the mornings. His oncologist gives him less than 2 months. She leads them through quiet hallways where staff speak in hushed tones. We've removed his phone as requested by your warrant. He hasn't asked about it yet. Outside room 117, an FBI agent nods to Samuels. He's been stationed there since the identification was confirmed, ensuring Tanner doesn't attempt to flee despite his deteriorating condition. Has he said anything significant? Samuels asks. Only that he's been expecting you, the agent replies. Said it almost with relief. The room they enter is sparse but comfortable. Medical equipment hums softly. The window overlooks the distant Catalina Mountains. William Tanner, once a robust and charming man by all accounts, is now skeletal, his skin yellowed. From liver failure, an oxygen tube runs beneath his nose. At 76, he appears decades older. His eyes, however, remain sharp and alert as they track the detective's entrance. A slight smile plays at the corners of his mouth. Detective Samuels, he says, his voice surprisingly strong. I recognize you. From the news coverage. And you must be Detective Rodriguez. Please have a seat. I've been waiting for this conversation for quite some time. Samuels remains standing, his posture rigid. William Tanner, we have a warrant for your arrest for the murder of Laura Miller in August 1981, and for the murders of Jessica Hammond and Daniel Forrester. You have the right to remain silent. Tanner waves a skeletal hand dismissively. Please, Detective. We both know I'll be dead long before any trial. The formalities seem rather pointless, don't they? I assume you're here for answers, not justice. Least not the kind of justice your legal system can provide. Rodriguez takes out a recorder. Do you understand that anything you say can be used against you in a court of law? Do you wish to have an attorney present? Tanner's laugh transforms into a rattling cough. To what end? No, I waive. Whatever rights you're about to recite. I want to talk. It's why I came here instead of disappearing completely. It's why I called your department, Detective Samuels, though you were apparently too busy to take my call. Samuels exchanges a glance with Rodriguez. No record of such a call exists. Let's start with Laura Miller, Samuels says, finally taking a seat. Why her? Tanner's gaze drifts to the window. There was never anything personal about my selections, if that's what you're asking. Laura was simply convenient. The right age, often alone, trusting. I saw her several times at the ice cream parlor while visiting Frederick and Margaret that summer. Children are creatures of habit, you know. Same route, same times, same locations. You groomed her, Rodriguez states, her voice tight. Her diary mentioned visits to the Gaines house, your special collection. Yes, that was my method. I would establish trust gradually, show interest in their lives, their hobbies, offer special attention, gifts. Children from middle-class families were ideal, comfortable enough to have some independence, not so privileged that their parents monitored every movement. He speaks, clinically, as if describing a scientific process rather than predatory behavior. What happened on August 15th? Samuels asks. Tanner's expression remains unchanged. I offered to show her a new addition to my collection, a music box from Switzerland. I had already given her treats with sedatives twice before, establishing the pattern. That day, I miscalculated the dosage. She had a seizure. It wasn't intentional. Dead children were never my goal. The cold detachment in his voice makes Rodriguez grip her pen until her knuckles whiten. Samuels maintains his professional facade, though a muscle twitches in his jaw. And your brother and his wife helped you cover it up. Frederick understood family loyalty above all else. Our father abandoned both of us. Different mothers, same pattern of neglect. We found each other in our 20s and formed a bond deeper than most blood relatives. Ever know? Tanner's voice takes on a nostalgic quality. Margaret was more reluctant, but she loved Frederick absolutely. She would do anything to protect him, including protecting me. They helped you with the others too? Jessica and Daniel? Rodriguez asks. Only with Laura. The others were earlier experiments, my learning phase. Frederick didn't know about them until after Laura, when he helped dig beneath the basement floor and discovered I'd already used the space. Tanner's eyes gleam with a disturbing pride. He was quite shocked at my efficiency. The interview continues for hours, Tanner providing details that only the killer could know. He describes the other children with the same clinical detachment. Not just the 3 found in Portsmouth, but 16 others across 7 states over 3 decades. His memory for details remains impeccable despite his illness, recalling names, dates, locations with archival precision. "Why are you telling us this now?" Samuels finally asks, his voice hoarse from hours of questioning. Tanner adjusts his oxygen tube before answering. "I've always appreciated symmetry, Detective. Beginnings and endings. My life is ending. And I find myself drawn to revisit the beginning of this aspect of my existence. Laura Miller was not my first, but she was the pivotal case, the one that transformed my brother into my accomplice. And Frederick? What's his role in all this now? Frederick has been my financial supporter and occasional facilitator since 1981. The dementia diagnosis is largely exaggerated for legal protection. He's quite lucid most days." Tanner's smile returns, though I suspect he'll deteriorate rapidly once he learns of our conversation today, as the Arizona sun begins to set, casting long shadows. Across the room, Tanner provides his final revelation, a safety deposit box key hidden in his nightstand. "Box 1173, First National Bank of Portsmouth," he explains. "Margaret kept a complete diary. After her cancer diagnosis, she gave me specific instructions. If the Portsmouth basement was ever discovered, the diary should become public. Consider it her confession and her penance." 2 days later, with court orders in hand, Samuels and Rodriguez open the safety deposit box in Portsmouth. Inside, they find 3 leather-bound journals meticulously documenting decades of knowledge, complicity, and eventually remorse. The entries from Margaret's final years reveal a woman consumed by guilt who chose silence over justice due to misplaced loyalty. Her last entry, dated just weeks before her death from cancer in 2015, reads, "I cannot face God with this secret. William's evil found fertile ground in Frederick's loyalty and my cowardice. Laura Miller's mother still walks this town like a ghost, searching for answers I could have provided decades ago. This journal is my testimony. May it speak when I no longer can. The evidence is comprehensive and damning. Frederick." Gaines is arrested at his Tampa retirement community the same evening. Despite his claims of cognitive impairment, financial records show he had been systematically liquidating assets and transferring funds offshore since the Portsmouth discovery. When confronted with his brother's confession and his wife's journals, Frederick's carefully constructed facade crumbles. In a recorded interview, he admits to helping conceal Laura's body and maintaining financial support for William's relocation after the incident. He denies knowledge of the other victims, though investigators remain skeptical. The dynamic between these brothers was extraordinary. Dr. Leslie Hammond, the FBI's forensic psychologist, explains after reviewing the case. William, the active predator, and Frederick, the enabling protector, each fulfilling the other's psychological needs in a relationship forged through childhood trauma. Add Margaret as the loyal facilitator, and you have a tragically perfect storm of pathology. William Tanner signs a complete confession from his hospice bed. In exchange, prosecutors agree not to seek the death penalty for Frederick, a largely symbolic concession given both men's advanced age and health conditions. As November turns to December, the investigation begins the painstaking process of connecting Tanner to cold cases across the country. DNA comparisons, timeline analyses, and the meticulous details from his confession provide answers to families who have waited decades. In my 30 years of law enforcement, I've never seen a case where technology and human testimony combined so effectively, admits FBI Assistant Director Calvin Morgan at a press briefing. Without modern DNA techniques, genealogical databases, and digital record analysis, Tanner's crimes might have remained buried forever. Yet without the human elements, Margaret's journals, Tanner's confession, we wouldn't have the full picture of how and why these tragedies occurred. In his hospice room, William Tanner watches news coverage of the case with apparent satisfaction. When a nurse asks if he regrets his confession, he simply replies, "Regret is for those with a future. I'm merely tidying up before departure." Frederick Gaines, held without bail in New Hampshire, refuses further interviews. His attorney issues a brief statement claiming diminished capacity and coercion by his domineering half-brother, assertions contradicted by the evidence of his decades-long financial support and active participation in the cover-up. For Detective Marcus Samuels, the case that defined his career is finally approaching resolution. As he prepares the final reports, he finds himself returning repeatedly to one question. What could he possibly say to Nancy Miller that would give meaning to her 41 years of waiting? February 2023. Snow falls gently on Portsmouth, blanketing the historic district in pristine white. The Portsmouth County Courthouse, a stately brick building, dating back to 1868, stands as a solemn backdrop for what local media have dubbed the reckoning, the culmination of a case that has haunted the community for over 4 decades. Inside Courtroom 3, every seat is filled. The proceedings today are largely ceremonial. William Tanner died in hospice care 6 weeks earlier, his confession and DNA evidence having conclusively linked him to 19 murders across 7 states between 1975 and 2002. Frederick Gaines, 84, sits in a wheelchair beside his attorney, his once commanding presence diminished by prison scrubs and wrist restraints. His plea deal, guilty to being an accessory after the fact in Laura Miller's murder, carries a 15-year sentence he likely won't survive to complete. In the front row sits Nancy Miller, now 76, her white hair pulled back in a simple bun. Beside her are her surviving children, David and Michael, both middle-aged men with families of their own. On her lap rests a framed photograph of Laura and a small silver box containing the medallion recovered from the basement. Judge Eleanor Harrington addresses the court. "Before I deliver this sentence, Mrs. Miller has requested the opportunity to make a victim impact statement. Mrs. Miller, whenever you're ready." Nancy rises slowly, assisted by her sons. The courtroom falls completely silent as she approaches the podium. For 41 years, she has imagined this moment. What she would say when finally face to face with those responsible for taking her daughter. Now that it has arrived, she speaks with unexpected composure. "On August 15, 1981, I lost more than my daughter," she begins, her voice clear and steady. "I lost the future we would have shared. I lost Laura's high school graduation, her wedding day, the grandchildren she might have given me. I lost my marriage. I lost the person I was before that day, a mother who believed she could protect her children from harm." She turns slightly to face Frederick Gaines directly. "For 41 years you lived in our community, Frederick. You attended the same memorial services I organized. You donated to the Laura Miller Foundation. You looked me in the eyes while knowing exactly what happened to my child and where she was buried. Your capacity for deception is as monstrous as your brother's capacity for violence." Frederick's gaze remains fixed on the table before him, his expression unreadable. Nancy continues, "I've been asked many times if this resolution brings me peace. The truth is more complicated. There is relief in knowing, in ending the questions that have defined my existence for 4 decades. But there is no peace in understanding the depravity that took Laura from us, or in knowing that other families suffered similar losses that might have been prevented if the truth had emerged sooner." She pauses, collecting herself. "What I've found instead of peace is purpose. The Laura Miller Foundation has helped identify remains in 22 cold cases. Nationwide, we've advocated for the DNA databases and forensic genealogy techniques that ultimately solved Laura's case. My daughter's legacy isn't her tragic end, but the light her story has shined into the darkness of other unsolved cases. As Nancy returns to her seat, Detective Marcus Samuels, sitting in the second row, blinks back tears. The case that bookended his career, from rookie officer to retiring detective, has transformed his understanding of justice. It isn't always swift or complete, but even delayed, it carries power. Judge Harrington delivers the maximum sentence allowed under the plea agreement. Frederick Gaines shows no visible reaction. As he's wheeled from the courtroom, he makes eye contact with Samuels for the first time. A fleeting look that communicates not remorse but a strange relief, as if even he welcomes the end of decades of deception. Outside the courthouse, snow continues to fall as reporters gather around Nancy Miller. She declines most questions, but offers a brief statement. Today doesn't end our story, it just closes one chapter. The Foundation's work continues. There are still families waiting for answers, just as we waited. 3 weeks later, a small ceremony takes place at Portsmouth Memorial Gardens. Laura Miller's remains, along with those of Jessica Hammond and Daniel Forrester, are finally laid to rest with proper funerals. The three families, connected by unimaginable tragedy, find solidarity in their shared experience. What began as individual grief has evolved into a collective mission for accountability and remembrance. The technical aspects of the case continue to reverberate through law enforcement nationwide. The Portsmouth Protocol, a systematic approach combining traditional investigative methods with advanced forensic techniques, becomes standard procedure for cold case units across the country. DNA samples from William Tanner and genetic markers found at crime scenes lead to the resolution of 7 additional unsolved murders previously unconnected to him. This case demonstrates the value of preserving evidence indefinitely, explains Dr. Amelia Chen at a forensic science conference in Boston. Samples collected in 1981, using techniques primitive by today's standards, still contained enough genetic material for modern analysis. Every cold case has the potential for resolution if the evidence is properly maintained. Margaret Gaines's journals become the subject of academic study, offering unprecedented insight into the psychology of those who enable predators. Her words, "I chose his love over their lives," become a cautionary cornerstone in criminal psychology textbooks. For the city of Portsmouth, the resolution brings both closure and renewed reflection. The Victorian house at 237 Hancock Street, scene of unspeakable crimes, is purchased by the city and demolished. In its place rises Laura's Garden, a peaceful memorial with 3 stone benches, one for each child found beneath the basement floor, and a small bronze statue of a young girl reading. Detective Elena Rodriguez, who partnered with Samuels on his final case, takes over leadership of the department's newly established cold case unit. The wall of her office features a quote from Nancy Miller. "Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it does provide new tools to address them." On a crisp April morning, Marcus Samuels clears out his desk after 38 years with the Portsmouth Police Department. His retirement had been delayed specifically to see the Miller case through to its conclusion. As he packs the last of his belongings, he finds the original missing person report for Laura, filed on August 15, 1981, the document that initiated his 4-decade journey. His final act before turning in his badge is a visit to Portsmouth Elementary School, where the Laura Miller Safety Program is being implemented. Children, learn about personal boundaries, trusted adults, and community responsibility, practical lessons drawn from tragic history. Detective Samuels helped find Laura, the principal explains to the 2nd grade class. Children the same age Laura was when she disappeared. The students present him with hand-drawn cards thanking him for his service. Later that afternoon, Samuels visits Nancy Miller at her home. The modest house on Pine Street has changed little over the decades, though photographs of grandchildren now share space with Laura's pictures on the walls. They sit on her porch, watching. Spring buds emerge on the maple trees lining the street. "What will you do now, Marcus?" Nancy asks, pouring tea into mismatched cups. "Fish, maybe. Read books that aren't case files. My daughter wants me to move closer to her family in Vermont. He pauses, searching for words. I've been defined by this case for so long it's hard to imagine life without it. Nancy nods in understanding. I felt that way after the trial. For 41 years I was the mother searching for her missing daughter. Now I'm the mother who found her. It's a different identity. It takes time to adjust. As the afternoon light fades, they discuss not the horror of what happened, but the unexpected connections forged through tragedy. The volunteers who became lifelong friends, the other victims' families who now work with the foundation, the cold case detectives across the country who learned from Portsmouth's example. Before leaving, Samuels presents Nancy with a small package, Laura's diary, released from evidence now that all legal proceedings are complete. The faded pages contain the innocent observations of a 7-year-old girl, excitement about a new school year, details of games played with friends, descriptions of her favorite ice cream flavors. She was more than what happened to her. Samuels says quietly. Yes, Nancy agrees, carefully holding the diary. That's what I've tried to remember all these years. 1 year later, on what would have been Laura's 50th birthday, Portsmouth dedicates a new wing of the police station housing the expanded cold case unit. The Laura Miller Center for Unresolved Investigations becomes a regional hub for applying advanced forensic techniques to long-dormant cases. At the dedication ceremony, Nancy Miller, now using a cane butt, still straight-backed and clear-eyed, cuts the ribbon. Beside her stands retired Detective Samuels. Neither needs to speak. Their presence itself embodies the principle that has guided them both: persistence in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. The center's lobby displays a simple plaque, with words taken from Margaret Gaines's final journal entry, a warning and a promise to future generations. Time conceals, but it also reveals. No truth remains buried forever. In Laura's garden across town, spring flowers bloom around the small bronze statue. Visitors often notice that the book, in the bronze girl's hands, has a title engraved on its spine: Unfinished Stories. Some leave small tokens, a toy, a ribbon, occasionally a photograph of another missing child whose case remains open. As daylight fades, Nancy Miller makes her daily visit to the garden, placing a fresh bouquet beside the statue. After 42 years, she has learned that justice, however delayed, creates ripples that extend far beyond a single case or community. Laura's story, tragic as it began, continues to influence investigations, protect children, and bring resolution to other families still waiting for answers. Nancy touches the bronze cheek of the statue gently before turning to leave. Sleep well, she whispers, a ritual unchanged since 1981. I kept my promise. I found you and brought you home. The answer, he realizes, isn't in the technical details of the investigation or even in Tanner's confession. It lies somewhere in the space between justice and closure, a space he hopes to help Nancy navigate as they enter the final chapter of Laura's story.